Please pray with me. So as we move into this time of prayer and inspiration, we do so knowing that there is one God in, of, and through all things. And we know that if God is in, of, and through all things, then everything is God. Everything is an expression of God, of Spirit. And we can breathe into this idea and breathe into this knowingness and just feel assured and reassured that this is good and this is perfect. And so what I know is I know that this power, this presence, this being, this Godness lives within each and every one of us. And so at times when we are challenged, we can turn to that power within. And at times when we are needing comfort, we can turn to that power within. And at times when we need guidance, we can turn our attention to that one Spirit, that one power. And I know this is good. I know it is perfect. I know it is absolutely great. And so we just allow ourselves to be calm and breathe into this time in this place, knowing that this is our time. Nothing else needs our attention right here and right now. So we let everything else go. We let everything else be. And so it is. Have you ever considered that there are certain topics that we consider to be taboo? There are certain conversations that many of us will not enter into. They're uncomfortable or they are intimidating maybe, and there are some things that we just don't talk about. And as a minister, there are many things that some of the people in ministry do not speak about. And I find this very curious because, as I just mentioned in that prayer, it's all God. And if it truly is all God, then we can rest in that space and that knowing that we are safe in any context, in any conversation, in any idea. And we don't need to feel that need to shut down or restrict ourselves, that we can open up to everything around us. So my talk title today is This Too Is God? And it's a question. This too is God? And I remind you, as you go through your week this week, that everything that happens, just ask that question. Now, don't misunderstand. God isn't making it happen. God created each one of us, and we each have that amazing innate ability of choice. And it is our choices and our decisions that bring about the conditions and the circumstances of our lives. But if we can breathe into each moment and we can breathe into each idea and remind ourselves that this is also God, this too is God, then we can feel more comfortable and confident knowing that we will move through it. We will absolutely move through it. I believe it is time. It is time for us to take a stand in courage and open ourselves to the conversations that require us to be fully present and courageous, and move away from the timidity and the desire to hide or withhold of times past. A little over a year ago, I stood before the cameras and spoke to each and every one of you about my awareness of who I am. I had come to the realization after the death of George Floyd in discovering that I have lived a life of privilege. And I don't have to go into all of that idea about did I choose it, did I create it for myself. It's not about that. It's mainly about the fact that the color of my skin is light enough that I have lived my life in a place of privilege where I now see many, many people who did not have that privilege. And I remember talking about the fact that I didn't know what to do. And there was a little shame in how I felt when I kind of woke up and figured out what was going on in the world, because I had avoided the news. I had avoided things in the media for so many years, and I was out of touch. And then I took about a year to educate myself, to read everything I could find, to research and to look at podcasts and videos and everything I could find to help get me educated about what my role is as a minister in this philosophy and on this planet, and my role as a leader and a woman and a white woman And what can I do? And how can I be an adversary? How can I be an ally for others? I encourage you to take a look at where you are in your life. No blame, no shame, because once we pay attention to where we are and we choose a different path or a different idea, we can move forward. And if we put blame and shame on it, then guilt pops its ugly head in there, and then we become restricted and we don't make the actions and the steps and the movements that we want to. Marianne Williamson has a beautiful quote, and we've heard it spoken by many people. And in that quote, she says, "Your playing small does not serve the world." I was in a class many years ago on human development, and I was a leader. I was the outspoken one. I had the ideas, and I kept, swaying people's opinions about some of the things that were going on. And I made a decision one evening to be quiet, to sit down and shut up and let somebody else step into their role of leadership. Because I was concerned that in the place where I was, that I was overpowering others and they weren't taking that step, they weren't taking that stand. And I wanted to give them an opportunity. And what I discovered over time was I had begun to play small. Because I was holding back and I was withholding what I knew and what I knew I could do, waiting for someone else to step forward. And you know what I found out? Nobody did. Nobody spoke up. Nobody stepped up. Because my role was not being taken on by someone else. It was mine to do. We can no longer hide in the closet or the corner. It's time for all of us to take a stand and to stand tall and to speak clearly and to use our minds and figure out what it is that we need to do, what is it we need to say, what are the actions that we must take. You see, our higher consciousness benefits the world. Let me tell you a little bit about David R. Hawkins. David R. Hawkins is a man who has calibrated human consciousness from its lowest vibration, and by the way, the lowest vibration of human consciousness is termed as shame, to its highest level of consciousness, which is called enlightenment. And what he has talked about, he has used kinesthetic testing, he has used charts and all types of things to explain. And a quote from him is this one: "Love is more powerful than hatred, and the truth sets us free." And so what we know in some of the work that he has done is that love operates at a higher vibrational level, at a higher consciousness than hatred. So evidently, obviously, it can permeate more things and it can support us. So here's an example, and I don't use a lot of figures and numbers and statistics, but I want to this time. In his studies, he shows that an individual who has raised their consciousness calibration to 500, which is love, counterbalances 750,000 individuals who calibrate below 200, which is the lowest level. Let me make sure you heard that. One person who moves their consciousness to a higher level, 500, which isn't even the highest level of called enlightenment, but to the level of love, can impact 750,000 people. If you think it isn't yours to do, if you are saying that I can't do it, one person can't make a difference, let me tell you, his very studies show us that you are incorrect, that is not the truth. And so as we increase our integrity and as we increase our understanding, our capacity for compassion, we can change the world. We can change the world for good. For good meaning forever, and for good meaning for the good of the world. We can make those changes. And we can focus on the people that are doing that very thing, and we can be supportive of them and connect with that. Every single day of your life, every single conversation is an opportunity for you to raise your consciousness. When we get into a conversation where we're talking about someone, or we're bringing somebody down, or we're being detrimental, we are not raising our consciousness. But when we are talking about the positive and the good and the great ideas and creativity. In that situation, we are raising the consciousness. So it's like this. If you take a rubber band and you stretch it beyond its capacity. Now, if you go too far, it'll snap, but I'm not talking about that. You just take a rubber band, you just stretch it as far as you can. When you let that rubber band go, it doesn't go back to its original size because it has been stretched beyond that. So another way to think of this is consider a small child. A small child who is developing and they have learned to crawl. And one day, that child pulls themselves up on a table and stands. And before you know it, that child takes a step. Now, what happens is, as they're pulling themselves up, they fall back down. And that happens a couple of times, but they keep pulling themselves up. And when they start to take a step, they might take a step or two and fall back down. But they do it again, and they do it again. At no point in time in that development of that healthy child does that child sit back and go, well, that didn't work, I'm not trying that again. And at no point do they start taking steps and then go, that's not working for me either, I'm going to go back to crawling, or for getting everybody to pick me up. They have been stretched. Their mindset has been stretched. Those of us in this philosophy cannot even comprehend going back to life the way it was before we learned these philosophies and teachings. I know I can't, because I have been stretched beyond my capacity to function like I once did. Science of Mind teaches us that our true nature is divine, and that we are part of the intelligence of universal mind. We are made up of pure spirit. We are divine beings having a human experience. Too easily we misuse the idea of the law. We allow ignorance to step in, and we do things and say things that aren't appropriate or that are harmful. And we make up a whole lot of stories about how this happens. I remind you, we are called to place no limits on God. That power, that limitless being, cannot harm us, cannot hurt, cannot allow us harm or allow us hurt. That is the thing we need to pay attention to. If we are operating from a place of less than, or we have a little good in our lives, it is time to go out and get a bigger bucket. Get a bigger container to fill with all your good. Because when I say spirit is limitless, and when you tap into that source, your experience gets to be limitless. That is the truth. That is the absolute truth. As we look at this idea of finding a bigger container to hold our greater good, we can do this through spiritual practices, affirmation, spiritual mind treatment, meditation, journaling, all of these wonderful things. Gratitude. Gratitude is a spiritual practice that expands our hearts, expands our minds, and helps us to look at limitless ideas of what lies before us. The more we see ourselves as the truth of our being, the less we suffer, the greater we heal, and the more impact we have on our lives and the lives around us. Our inner life becomes bigger, our inner light becomes brighter. How beautiful is that? What happens when we move into that space and when we start believing who we are and how we are, and things start to expand exponentially, magic kicks in. I choose to call it magic, because our circumstances begin to change. And our lives begin to fall into place and things begin to work. And we decide we want to do something, and then everything just kind of leads us into that space, into that place, and it works out perfectly. We don't struggle as much as we once did. Ernest Holmes says this: our belief sets the limit to our demonstration of a principle which is without limit. It is ready to fill everything because it is infinite, it is entirely a question of your own receptivity. So again, we are reminded, it is done unto us as we believe. Whatever we experience, whatever we can embrace, whatever we can expect in our lives, that is how much good can come to us. So my question is, are you willing to give up the stories of the past? Are you willing to give up some of those restrictions that you may have or someone else may have placed upon you in your life? Are you ready to enter into the conversations that are intense, that are significant, that will actually bring and evoke change around us? We need to stop walking on eggshells, afraid to connect and afraid to express our own ideas and thoughts. As a society, I think we're waking up. We're waking up. And we're coming into that place, just like when an alarm clock goes off in your house. I don't know if you use alarm clocks anymore, but if you do, that was that thing that kind of startled you out of whatever was going on. And then in a moment, you remember there's something you get to do. There's some place you need to be. So in that place of waking up, let's look at what it is that we must do. And so this week, I just encourage you to take the time to look at your life and to identify if there is a place where harmony is missing, balance, peace. And what is it going to take to get you there? And if you don't know what it is, take it to prayer, because that is where the answers come. Take it to your meditation pillow. Listen to that voice, that inner voice of guidance. And any time this week when you sit down, if you choose to watch the news, remind yourself that the news is bringing you an opportunity to pray. Because if we get caught up in the drama and the trauma and the pain and the agony, we kind of get stuck there. But if we can take all of those things that we see happening in all of those conditions in the world and we can move them into prayer and just turn them over to Spirit, then we can breathe easily and then we can move forward and we can continue. Each one of us dwells in the oneness of God. Spirit, this power, this presence I talk about, lives inside us. It is not out there somewhere. It is right here. We are one with it. Embrace that idea. Accept that idea. Hold on to that very knowing for yourself. We are in the midst of social unrest. We are in the midst of many, many things happening in our planet. And we have the right and the responsibility to apply these teachings to every single aspect that we come in contact with. Let's deepen and raise our consciousness. And know that as we deepen and raise our own personal consciousness, we do that same for the entire planet. Please pray with me. As we move past this time of connection and inspiration, we once again affirm and know and acknowledge and recognize that God is all there is and that there is only one. There is only one power. Omnipotent, omniscient, all-seeing, all-knowing, everywhere present. God is. God is in, of, and through all things. So knowing this, we know that every action, every idea, every word we speak is of God. Spirit is in all of this. And what this does for us is it brings us to that level of awareness and attention that we are responsible and accountable for what we bring forth because we are at choice. And so today and this week, may we make the best and the brightest and the most beautiful choices and the most deepening of conversations come forth for us, and we connect and we embrace and we become a part of a living entity that we call humankind, and we become participative in all of this, and we take the actions that we are inspired to take. And we do all of this in courage in truth, in love. So I just send blessings out around the planet right here and right now for all people everywhere to be comforted, to feel that very energy of love, to be safe, protected, guided in all things. Knowing that all is well and all is good and all is God and all is perfect, I simply let this go. I release these words to the law of mind, knowing it's already happening. It's already happening as I have spoken. I let go and let God. And so it is.